Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. I am your host, Patty Rose. My guest today for the second time is a dear friend, Nels Pasternak. Nels is a special education teacher at South Eugene High School. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back and get to talk with you again.
Yeah, this is cool. You came on 6 months ago and we talked about your work as a special educator at South Eugene High School. And you're also the chair of, tell me that again, the board that you're involved with.
The Oregon Education Association's Special Ed Committee. So I'm the chair of the Special Ed Committee for OEA.
And we have, personally, you and I have known each other for over 20 years, and we have some amazing conversations, probably at least, once every couple weeks, hour-long phone calls, which is pretty rare these days. And we talk about a lot of stuff, and you've really shown me and educated me a lot on the goings on in the educational system, especially primarily in special education. And, with everything going on with the closures and distance learning and, working towards hybrid learning, getting back in a hybrid setup, getting students back into classrooms, there's a lot going on. So I thought 6 months was long enough. I wanted to have you back on the show. We got something super exciting too to talk about today. You and your wife, Charu, just launched a new website called educationalequitynow.com. And we're going to talk about that at the end of this. We'll bring her on and we'll talk about your website. And it's pretty incredible. It's a very useful tool for students and educators and parents alike. So we'll get to that in a little bit. It's educationalequitynow.com. And the link, I'm going to say this a bunch today, the link to that website will be in the show notes. And so I definitely encourage anybody listening, when they're done listening to this podcast, to go check out your website. We'll talk about that at the end.
Thank you.
But again, thanks for doing this. And so let's just get into it. One of the things with distance learning, there's been some serious fallout from what's happened over the last year with COVID. And this is what we've been talking about a lot behind the scenes. But one of the things that's more apparent now than ever is the need for technology skills. And you wanted to talk about that today. So we'll start with that.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so yeah, let's just talk on that. That a lot of people are working from home. Obviously, students were doing distance learning. And, on the last episode, we talked at length about the challenges for special needs students with distance learning. And so today we're going to get a little bit more broad and talk about just what it's going to look like moving forward. But you really think that there's a very huge importance being shown on the need for technology skills. So speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like as long as we're doing distance learning, I think we should be explicitly teaching the actual technology skills and shift some of the focus from the other subject matter and make the time to teach how to use the technology in all the classes. I think that the use of technology in learning is going to get bigger going forward. It's pretty much everyone's going to use the internet at times in their lives to learn new things. And, most people are doing this, daily. The internet genie's never going back in the bottle. We use technology for everything for, can I feed this to my dog, to, oh, I have this rash, like, what should I do about it? To, oh, I heard this word, I don't know, I want to look it up. And we're all doing that so often these days. But there's a lot of new technology. And I think that as a result of distance learning, it's just kind of, that's expanding at a rapid pace. And I feel like it's really important because a lot of the jobs of the future, are also going to be based on technology. And I also think we need to be thinking collectively about what the long-term impacts of the COVID pandemic are going to be, especially concerning technology and the jobs of the future. We need to realize that the landscape of learning and work in some ways is going to be changed forever. And people who are burying their heads in the sand or refusing to acknowledge this are going to be inflicting harm on themselves. Everyone now has experience working remotely. So we're going to see more distributed teams. And previously, distributed teams and work were a big challenge because very few people, knew how to work remote or how working remote, happens or the logistics of it. And now everyone's working remote. So it's going to be easier to have teams be in different locations as long as the time zones, match up. So people can work in smaller offices in more places. And I think that might have impacts for inclusiveness and diversity because companies are going to be able to have an increased number of smaller offices. And that means they might be able to get people who work in different cities with different demographics, all working together.
Yeah. So one of the things we're going to be talking a lot about today is equity, and equity specifically in education. Tell me a little bit about what equity, what that means. Last time you were on, we talked at length about some of the issues with just access to internet and access to iPads, for example. We talked about how the local school districts have put in like a bus with Wi-Fi, and how that's just, it's not effective. You know, one of the things that we can do to build equity is to work towards making internet a public good. That it's something that everybody has access to. But tell me what it is, what equity is.
Well, equity is kind of the opposite of the one size fits all model to education. Equity is not about giving everyone the same thing. Equity is about giving people what they need to have a fair opportunity to learn based on the individual exceptionalities that they experience. So equity is about special education, when it's done right, is like a vehicle for equity. It's individualized instruction, accommodations, modifications, making sure that we are seeing people and meeting people where they're at and seeing what level of help they need and making sure that they have that help to have a really fair opportunity for a free and appropriate public education. That's part of the special education law, is that we're supposed to provide free and appropriate public educations to all students who experience exceptionalities. And, you only do that by building strong, interpersonal relationships. Relationships are extremely important in any kind of education, and especially in special education. You need to understand the strengths, needs, and interests and the preferences of the students that you're working with. Take a strength-based approach and really collaborate. It has to be collaborative. It has to be based on that we're listening to families and we're listening to kids, and that we're not like trying to force this one size fits all model on people. And it's providing everyone with an equal, opportunity for access to public education.
It's interesting because with your experience working in the area that you do, when COVID hit and everybody was kind of, had to work on the fly on how they were going to go about distance learning, would you say that your experience with special education gave you kind of a benefit to know at least some of the issues that would arise because people weren't prepared, on just full scale? Like everybody found themselves in a situation where they were behind the curve, more or less. And so every day, I'm sure at work, you have challenges on how to work with each individual student, So I don't know if I want to say, did it put you in an advantage, but is it something where you're like, okay, now everyone understands what my daily life was like, before this?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, for me, in the type of job I have, I work with students who have like what's called low incidence disabilities or kind of rare disabilities. So I'm always learning new things every day. I feel like teachers and students always have dual roles, like we're both teachers and we're both learners. And I've been seeing the technology develop in a lot of different ways. So, I mean, that helps in a way, I guess. Like we're using now in class, like I have a student who uses eye gaze technology to communicate, who's nonverbal and, in a wheelchair. And she has like this device where she can just look at like a picture card with a phrase. And if she looks at it, and intentionally, then the machine will say that. And that's really cool. You can broadcast that screen onto Zoom and we can see where her eyeballs are and like see what that student's looking at. And then we have other students who use step talkers, which are like little recording devices where you can have a preloaded message and they just have to touch it and it'll say something, and you can program like 3 different levels of messages so they can participate in discussion that way. We have students who can hook like switches up to a computer. And so when they hit the switch, it'll play a video or it will read a page. We can do group reading with students who can't read, but they have switch access to the computer. We have students with augmentative communication devices so that they're learning, rapidly how to use those devices to speak, to facilitate conversation. And they can't verbally say things, but they can say things using the augmentative communication programs on like the iPad minis. And so we've had a lot of experience with certain technology, but I wouldn't say I was a lot more prepared for this than anyone else. I've had to learn a ton of technology skills myself in this year, and I'm continuing to try to do the best to learn new technology every day. And there's definitely some teachers, I think really like maybe the computer science teachers were the most prepared.
Sure.
But even computer science is an ever evolving field. You have to continue to stay on top of your learning, because what was new technology 5 years ago is now obsolete.
Right.
So in a lot of situations.
One of the things you and I were talking about yesterday was silver linings. And this is kind of a broad thing, but I guess what I was getting at is it's like this kind of one of the silver linings is it exposed an issue. It exposed equity concerns across the board for everyone in different ways, and uh, so, I mean, I want to speak on that a little bit. What do you think are some of I don't know if silver linings is the right word, but just what are some of the things that we've now been made aware of that this is what I was kind of implying, that you as a special educator might have already kind of been aware of, but now we know on a bigger scale that we really need to be thinking outside the box and we need to evolve our thought, and what are some of the silver linings of this last year? And also, since the last time we spoke, what would you say is the thing that you've learned the most from distance learning, specifically for special needs students?
All right. Well, I think the silver linings, I can't just talk about silver linings, because I think that you have to talk about silver linings and equity concerns, and that there's new equity concerns that are being brought out by distance learning and the situation that we're all in. And I would say, starting with your second question first, the thing that I've learned, I guess, the most for working with my students is that any student has the ability to learn new technology skills if you make that a focus of what you're teaching. Like students with exceptionalities can learn a lot of new technology skills if they have help to do so. And that's, I guess, if you want to call that a silver lining, not everyone, but a lot of people are learning new technology skills. I would say remote work and remote learning will be more common, and the daily commute will become less common as time evolves. In terms of equity concerns, I'm really concerned that a new educational divide is being created between people who are actively engaged in learning technology skills during this time and people who are not. I'm concerned that people will try to justify the creation of this gap and blame this on effort and maybe perseverance or a lack thereof. And if that happens, it will be really unfair, because there's also a major access gap to technology based on gender, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. A lot of people do not have access to high quality computers. And also a lot of populations, especially minority populations, tend to live in areas that have poor broadband access. That makes it a lot harder to stream videos. One of the big challenges in distance learning, I believe, is finding other ways to teach besides using video. So like audio podcasts, maybe with accompanying slides, would be an alternative that should be explored maybe more, because that consumes less broadband, and most people do have access to smartphones these days. And, on a smartphone, that works better with a podcast kind of format. Knowledge and software for things like setting up guided access and limiting certain websites like YouTube might be important, so that parents can control what their kids are using the technology for. Like I hear stories of parents asking, hey, they call the district and say, how do I disable my kids' YouTube? They're watching videos when they should be in class. And then sometimes districts say, oh, there's no way we can do that. Well, there is technology for that. And with a lot of the Apple and Android systems, there's like built-in technology where you can set a parental restriction on YouTube, but maybe people in districts don't know that. And I think at the very least, like maybe doing that one-on-one, like with every family, is not going to be possible or feasible, because, have you ever tried to give, if you're giving tech support to someone who doesn't understand what you're saying on the phone and you're not there in person to show them, that can be hard. But, there's also remote control, so that with Zoom, you can actually share remote control and people can share remote control with you, so you can like access their computer just like it was your own computer. But I think at least they should have like, print out directions, like they should be sharing like directions for how to have parental access and how to do screen sharing and like how to do remote control and how to do annotation tools and things like that. There's also like just a lot of other information that's not widely shared that people should be aware of. Like, you can use a cell phone to set up your own Wi-Fi network. We can set anyone with a, unlimited data plan and a smartphone can set up a Wi-Fi hotspot from their phone. And then you have Wi-Fi that your phone is generating.
Right.
And I don't know how many people know about the guided access or the parental control, or setting up the Wi-Fi hotspot, or the annotation tools, or that you can use remote control to let students control your screen to learn, or vice versa for you to provide tech support to families. So I think there's a knowledge gap, but there's also an access gap. that I see, and the knowledge is not always the right knowledge that people really need is not always being shared proactively in the ways that it should, in my opinion.
So one of the things, I mean, we're going to talk about your website in a bit, but is that something that you would like to see kind of utilized on your website? Maybe some kind of instructional videos, or I know you had mentioned that, and we'll, like I said, we'll get into that more later, but you had mentioned how you want to set up a forum so that people, if they have questions, parents or teachers or students can, pose questions to the community and then kind of get response that way. But is that something long term that you'd like to see the website have tools to kind of educate maybe a parent on what they might even not know that they need to know?
Yeah, I mean, we have 4 sections that we have for the website, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. We have educational resources that are categorized in a bunch of different categories. Charlie could talk more about that. We have, community resources, which starts out just kind of sharing different places that people, especially people who experience exceptionalities, can go to get services and supports. But I'd like to expand the community resources. And we also have professional development for parents and educators. And then we have a contact us that's going to turn into a public forum. But I would like to see in the community resources, adding some of the how-to documents for how to screen share from an iPad, or how to use some of these tools to help make life a lot easier for people who are doing distance learning and using the technology to learn. And the way that this website is set up is it's meant to be like a collaborative hub, so that people can send us resources, that especially free resources that they think are very helpful, and we can add them as time goes on. We're going to be turning it not just a website, but Educational Equity Now, we envision it to be a nonprofit.
Like a community, essentially.
Yeah, and an online hub or community collaboration space. Yeah. And we have to probably turn it into a nonprofit first, because the amount of time that it's already taken a lot of time to set up where we are now, and in order for it to evolve the way we want it to be, we have to continue to put a significant portion of time into it.
Right. So now, I mean, anyone is aware over the last year, anyone with kids is aware of, the many challenges with distance learning. One of the issues is student engagement. You had wanted to talk about this, for a student really feeling heard, because a lot of times, and this goes from kindergarten all the way through college, that people are dealing with. I work on campus and I talk to college kids every day, and they're like, I'm not learning anything because I'm just being talked at. I'm not engaged in anything, so I don't, they don't get their feet wet, more or less. So, talk on that. How much student engagement have we lost because of distance learning, and has the public education system lost the focus on student engagement that we were collaboratively building?
I feel like student engagement needs to be the forefront of our educational focus, and we need, I don't think we should wait for that to happen. I think that we should start working on that now. I think we've absolutely lost a lot of student engagement. I think that there's no debating that we have lost student engagement in this model. And I think that we have lost a little bit of the focus on it too, because so many people are just new to the technology, or they're just trying to get through like the daily routine of, maybe just try to make it one day to the next, and with everything that's going on. And, I wouldn't want to blame anyone for that, because the pandemic, many of us have lost loved ones during this time, including myself, and my family has lost loved ones, not necessarily directly because of COVID, but there's people who have lost loved ones because of COVID and because of other reasons. And we all have a friend who's probably, had COVID at this point. And so there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of that people are going through. And then there's also additional trauma of having to recreate how you do your job. But at the same time, I think we need to be finding ways to improve student engagement and collaboration. And we need to use a lot more of the tools that help make that possible. I'm a big, believer in the Google Drive tools, but with the folders. I think that we could be doing more work, like giving students access to shared Google folders and documents, and letting them create projects and finding out what's interesting to them, and putting them in teams and letting them do some of the research and create the slides, together. And that we should do more of that, because that allows them to be social in an online modality, and it allows them to use some of these tools that a lot of the adults are using. I don't know how much that's happening. I know that in my life skills class, I've made a Google Drive folder for every student. And for every IEP goal that they have, I have made a separate folder inside their main folder, which has learning materials specific to the IEP goal. and data sheets. And I shared those folders with all of my IAs, and each student folder shared with them and their family. And so that the materials are always accessible. They can see when I add new materials in, they can request things that they want to help support their student in whatever IEP goal area that they might have. I can find the material, drop it in the folder, and they instantly see it. You can do things like open up a Word document, and they can be typing and you can be typing, and you can in real time see each other typing at the same time. And you can give corrections in that way, and it makes it more engaging. You can add, my daughter who's 8, learned to make a Google slide show. We made a lesson together just for fun. We made like a star signs lesson project where we listed all the star signs and 6 positive characteristics of every star sign. And then we made slides with pictures that describe what those characteristics are. And we just did that as like a writing project, or as a discussion prompt, so that students could, if they wanted to, could look up their star sign, and they could look at the characteristics that are normally attributed to that. And then they could write about which ones they think they have, or they could talk about what does it mean to be, persevering, or what does it mean to be, a critical thinker, or what does it mean to be compassionate? Like we only did positive ones, but after I did that with my 8-year-old, she went and made her own for our family. And so there are ways to get kids excited about learning, even in a distance learning modality, but you're not going to get anyone excited about learning if you're just sage on the stage, acting like, there's this, some elements in society, it's like there's this, perspective that teachers are just like gas station attendants, and we're pumping curriculum into kids' heads, and then we turn it off when the lesson is over. And that's an outdated model of education. I took professional development in the Skillful Teacher series, and one thing that I really liked from that professional development is it's all about how do I talk less as a teacher and get my students collaborating and talking more around what the subject matter is. And I think that's super important, because there's also a quote that says the person who's doing the talking, that's who's doing the learning. And to an extent, you can't have students just talking about whatever they want all the time, but we should be getting them, we should be empowering students to be engaged in the learning process as much as possible. And, we should try not to talk so much as teachers, I think, and let them talk and do more, and let them use the tools. And, there's also there's annotation tools on Zoom. So like if you're sharing a screen, I can draw. Like you could share a whiteboard on your Zoom screen, and you and I could do art together at the same time, where you could share a video or a discussion prompt, and all the students could type their answer on the same thing. Then you could use screenshot, which is like Shift Command 4, and you could be saving that, and that can be artifact work samples, like instant data just from the screenshot. And, we do in my class at the first and last school day of every month, we do a collaborative art project now, where I share a whiteboard for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and everyone in the class uses the annotation tools and draws on that. And we create like pretty beautiful, I think they're beautiful works of art, and I save those. And it's just kind of something to look back on that was creative and fun.
Yeah.
And, there's other tools as well, like the remote control is really helpful.
So those things you're talking about right there, it's really best utilized on like an iPad, right? Not on a laptop, because if you're going to be drawing, you have to be able to have access to the pen, and this exposes.
No, actually, we do it all on a laptop. Sorry,
on a laptop with a mouse or whatever.
The Zoom annotation tools are it's like an art palette. You can do stamps, you can do all different kinds of art. You use the mouse. We don't do any of that on a laptop at all.
What I was going to say though, and I mean, even access to a laptop, this exposes the issues with equity, because some people don't have a laptop, some people don't have a tablet, and so that's where we're going to have to think outside the box, as the adults here that are going to try to figure out how we're going to fund that, how we're going to make sure that, that's not your job description, but we are going to talk about that a little bit in as far as OEA and the committee. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk on, go ahead.
So I just want to say that the schools do hand out laptops to all the students in our district. The schools are giving all the students have been provided laptops from the school, and they give out Wi-Fi hotspots as well. So I don't want to discount or discredit the work that some of the administrators are doing good work for equity. And I just want to say, I have friends who are school administrators, and there's good administrators and there's bad administrators, just like there's good teachers and bad teachers. Sure. But the rollout of technology, that has been a part of the process. And as far as I know, every student who's engaged in distance learning has access to a school provided laptop
Right.
At
And
this.
that's great. And that's exactly what I'm saying. So like in the past, they acknowledged an equity concern. And then now where we're at, they've actually done something about it. You know, you've had somebody like you're saying that the schools are now providing, like you said, Wi-Fi and laptops and access to that stuff. And it's so, I mean, when we learn from COVID, distance learning has shown us just the need for tools and for technology and the use of technology. But the only way that's going to happen is if everybody has the same tools. And so that is a really good news to hear that at least in our area, you know, because we're speaking about Lane County here in Oregon, probably, that you know that's being addressed, that those issues are being addressed, and there's progress being made, and that's a good thing. So now you wanted to say, I mean, it's a general question, but what is the point of education? I mean, this is a big question, but what is the general idea and goal of education?
I feel like you know, I feel like the point of education, there's multiple main, you know, themes or points to education. I feel like drawing out what's within people is a main focus. You know, there's a quote from a song that I like called "Find No Enemy." It's by an artist named Tequila, and the quote is, you know, from what the system wants to do is the working class to keep them uneducated, because truly educated men can never be racist, and to educate is to try out what is within, and are we not all the same under the skin? And that's an interesting quote. And that makes me think about how there are entities that want education to be about forcing people to comply with the status quo and sit quietly while they listen to lectures. And that I believe that there's factions that want education to be about creating obedient drones who memorize facts and follow directions. And like the metaphor I gave about the gas station attendant, you know, just pumping in the curriculum is kind of an example of that. And how we want the future of education to turn out is one of the central, you know, philosophical battles of our time, in my opinion. And there's a famous quote that says teachers are the bridge between what is and what is possible. And in order for that to be true, we have to have students being empowered to engage and inspired to want to learn. And, you know, society needs to realize that memorization is not comprehension, you know.
Absolutely.
And that's a big difference. Like we don't want to have, you know, education should not be about compliance. Education should be about empowering students to collaborate and to engage in the educational process and to let their voices be heard. And we want to inspire kids to want to learn and develop the habit of being lifelong learners. And we have to make learning fun for the kids so that they see the benefit and learn to attach an intrinsic value to learning. That's the real way that I feel like society is going to continue to evolve in a positive way, is that we want people who are educated and who are on the path of consistent self-improvement. I believe that's a big part of what life is about. You know, so Charu and I actually created a logo related to this, and we're in the process of creating t-shirts. It's these t-shirts that we're creating. This is our logo. It says empower, inspire. And we're creating t-shirts that we're going to sell, and we're going to donate a significant percentage of the profits to local nonprofit organizations that support people who experience exceptionalities.
And those shirts will be available on the website?
I don't think they might be on a separate website, because the Educational Equity Now is a separate project, and Empower Inspire is a different project. Educational Equity Now is a nonprofit, and this one we're just going to sell some shirts and donate some of the profit to local organizations that, you know, support people with exceptionality. So and we're not ready on that project. We're still waiting for t-shirts to come in. We have our prototypes, but we don't have ones for sale yet, but that'll be available. I'll let you know when they're available.
Yeah, as soon as those are available, I'll definitely share that on my socials and on the podcast. So, you know, we're going to talk a little bit before we bring your wife, Charu, on. We're going to talk a little bit about your work with the OEA and the committee work. You know, this is an interesting thing you had wrote down that you wanted to talk about. If public education starts to become more privatized, let's talk about that a little bit.
So before we go into the SPED committee work, you know, just a thought I'm concerned about as a potential negative impact or effect of how distance learning of COVID in general and distance learning. I'm worried about, you know, public education becoming more and more increasingly privatized. And I also think there's factions in the country that want to see a for-profit education system as the main model of education. And if that happens, that's going to only increase the equity gap. And I think, like, if we as public educators and people running the public education systems, we need to be checking in more with the families and finding out what they want for their kids, what the kids want, and what the parents want as much as possible regarding public education. And that if, eventually we see a shift to more for-profit, education systems, I think one of the reasons that shift will happen is because when people start doing it for money, they're going to ask the customers, meaning the families and the students, what it is that they want to learn and how they want to learn it. And they're going to be responsive to those, to the answers that they get. And I think that a lot of time we just do things in public education and we don't ask enough questions about, and we don't differentiate enough about how we're providing things that meet the needs of the families and the students that we serve. And, you can also see that kind of in a distance learning context. Like I would like to see families and maybe teachers having been surveyed to begin with, and asking which teachers would prefer to teach in person, which families, I know some of that's happening, but we could have matched or tried to match maybe like teachers who want to stay online with families that want to keep kids online to an extent. I mean, we had a lot of state regulations that just changed, so I'm not saying that hasn't happened or but I have all the answers for what should happen.
Sure.
But I do know that in general, I think public education works better when we're actually asking people what help they need, and that whenever you help people in any context, you need to ask them how they want to be helped
and what's working and what's not. Yeah.
So
now you wanted to talk about Senate Bill 580. So what is that about?
So with as part of the work that we've been doing as the Oregon Education Association's Special Ed Committee, we helped sponsor a Senate bill. So Senate Bill 580 is about making class size and caseloads a mandatory subject of bargaining in our schools. And that's just about, a lot of times it's not in the contracts for educators. And so you could have the same school district, you could have an educator with 28 students, or you might in special education, and you might have another educator with 16 and they're getting the same amount of prep time, or they're being given, they're being treated like they're doing the exact same job. And that's not fair for the students, because one student is getting, a lot more time and attention from their teacher who's in a smaller class, and another student is, through no fault of the teacher, getting a lot less. It's not fair to have such wide discrepancies in caseloads and class sizes in districts for teachers or for students. And so it should be balanced. And I think I'm not saying that everyone should have to follow the same rule, but I think that that's a good legislation, because if class size and caseload are mandatory subjects of bargaining, then every local district has to at least have that discussion with their teachers and see what makes sense for them. And I just think that should also be equitable, like having caseloads and class sizes in a district be relatively similar for all the teachers is something that helps promote equity.
Now, what is being done to kind of get the word out about that Senate bill proposed?
Well, there's a listening session on March 3rd that I'm going to be participating in with the Senate, and then I'll know more about that afterwards. So right now we've just been working on that through the Special Ed Committee and through OEA's legislative team. And so right now they're in the process of getting senators to sponsor, or of local legislators or state legislators to sponsor that bill and to move it forward to where the point it can get to the point where it can be voted on and hopefully passed. Right. So it's not complete. We're still in process on that.
So there's also something you wanted to talk about before we move on and talk about the website, the mental health action plan. We need to have a coherent plan to help support students' mental health in schools. So talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, the Special Ed Committee is working on a mental health action plan. We feel like we definitely need to have a plan to help support students' mental health in schools. As you said, we don't see a lot of leadership in this area, and we want to create a blueprint for that and a plan, because mental health is really important, and we feel like supporting students to have good mental health, or supporting students who need that kind of support in the schools, is a part of the job, and that it should be focused on more seriously, especially given this collective trauma, that we're all living through. So we're in the process of creating that. And, there has been some examples of good leadership in this area. Like, I really appreciate the work of Nadine Burke-Harris, who's a Surgeon General of California and a pioneer in the treatment of toxic stress. She's also a pioneer when it comes to the idea of ACE scores. And so ACE scores are basically it's based on a survey about adverse childhood experiences. And what she found in her research is that people who have experienced a significant number of adverse childhood experiences have long-term health implications. Because when you have like a negative experience, like say a bear comes into your house, you know, and you have that adrenaline and your heart pumping, that's a healthy response. Maybe you get out of the house before the bear eats you, and you know you're, you know, it's a silly metaphor, but like that response of your physiological system helps you escape the bear, hopefully. But if the bear keeps coming into your house like every single day, eventually all that adrenaline and all that heart rate pumping, that physiological response becomes very destructive, or it wears you out and it causes long-term. And that's maybe that's not the best metaphor, but that's the metaphor that she gave in her TED talk. And so I'm kind of paraphrasing her own metaphor, but you can see why, like, having repeated adverse, you know, childhood experiences, it has a lot of health implications, and they're for mental health and physical health, and they're not good.
Yeah.
You know, and it's something that we should be more aware of. It's something that we should figure out how to help with, and it's something that we should be able to assess, in my opinion. And I know,
go ahead.
But I don't know if we have time, but there's two other things with the OEA Special Ed Committee work that I just kind of wanted to touch on if there's time, but if there's not,
go ahead.
So two other things we've been working on is we're working on an awareness campaign where we picked like, we had like 30 topics related to special education that we thought there needs to be more awareness and training about or presentations on. And so we boiled that down through a ranking system to 5 main topics. And we're working on creating presentations for professional development that are teacher-led, and also podcasts on these topics. And we're in teams of like 2 to 4 people in the SPED committee working on different topics. Like I'm working on positive behavior intervention and supports, and we're going to be uploading those once they're complete. That will be part of the professional development section on the Educational Equity Now website once those get completed. And then the other thing I just wanted to touch on is we also created, and we've done other work besides just these 4 things, but we created a statement on distance learning from the Special Education Committee. And basically, we think that distance learning should be less about the paperwork and the compliance and more about human connections and asking families how we can best help them during these times. And that's kind of where I'd led in, where if public education starts to become more privatized, it will partially be because for-profit companies will ask customers what they want and try to deliver on those things. And we don't do that enough, maybe in public education. But that's a really strong feeling that we have about distance learning. It also kind of relates to, I don't know if you read in the news recently, like Biden's administration decided not to cancel the federally mandated standardized tests this year. And a lot of people are disappointed. And I count myself among that, because I don't think, what sense does it make to have the state federally mandated tests in the middle of a pandemic? Like, I think it would have been a lot more of a compassionate move to have canceled those personally.
Yeah.
You know,
well, there's a lot being done. And again, I want to commend you on the work that you do with that committee. And you're always welcome to come back on the show and talk about the progress of how this stuff is going. And, you know, one of the things I wanted, when we were talking about earlier about silver linings, one of the silver linings of COVID and some of the shutdowns, distance learning, this whole thing, is that, again, it's exposed some of the issues. And so once you can diagnose the issue, then you can start finding solutions. And so that's, I think, a good thing. You know, I mean, it's not a fun situation when you realize that there's inequities and whatnot, but at least then if you can acknowledge that it exists, then you can start making progress to fix it. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to quick break. And then we're going to bring your wife, Charu, on, and we're going to talk about the website. So we'll be right back.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, we are back, and we're now joined by Charu Pasternak, and we're going to talk about the website. But first, let's learn a little bit about who you are. You're a senior software engineer, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you, Patrick, for having us on your show. I'm a mom. I'm a partner. I am a daughter, a sister, a friend. I'm a senior software engineer. I'm a lead, and I belong here.
Well, tell me a little bit more. What do you mean by you belong here?
So, you know, I moved here from India 14 years ago. And up until the last 4 or 5 years, I always felt like, you know, this is not my country, this is not my place, not my people, gone through this entire learning curve of learning a new language, food, people, customs, everything. So, I always would have a sense that I don't belong here. Up until 4 or 5 years ago, I really had this epiphany that I need to give back to this community. Eugene is such an amazing place, and I've had, so much learning experiences here. I started volunteering at elementary schools, and thanks to Mozilla for funding the Gigabots program for Lane ESD, I would go into elementary schools, and that was just the highlight. Like seeing those 4th, 5th graders be excited to work with a bot and talk about coding, and just making that learning so much fun and engaging, where they would write something, they would push it to the bot, and it would just work. It would move forward or do something. And other things like talks at PDX Women in Tech, and just really giving back to the community, being a support system for some of the gals who are trying to get into the tech industry. That just really gave me a sense of belonging. And I think that just changed my entire perspective of where I am and who I am. And, I belong here.
Yeah, that's pretty great. So now you had mentioned, as a woman and as an immigrant, as a senior software engineer, what are some of the challenges that you faced?
Women in general are very underrepresented in the tech industry. I mean, just at the workplace where I am at, up until 2 years ago, we had, over 70 plus software engineers and 3 women.
Wow.
And out of those 3 women, only 1 Indian. And, more often than not, even these days, when I go to meetings, it's all men, and I'm the only one. And, so, and I think it all boils down to education at the elementary level, which is why, I really make it a priority to empower all young children, especially girls. We shouldn't have a predefined role that, you would be best suited for a teacher, or, other roles like that. So I think it's really important to highlight that and encourage it, and just kind of present it in a fun way, because when you make learning fun, we all learn, but we retain that information for a longer period of time if we are having fun while we're doing it. It is challenging, but you have to persevere through it, and you have to bring the positive self always. One thing that really helps me as an immigrant, as a female in the tech industry, is open communication. I'm very transparent. I communicate my expectations very clearly, and like that empathy, I lead with empathy. And I think that kind of over time trickles down to all aspects of your life, including work.
Now, there's been a big push to get, you had mentioned young girls, especially, involved in the STEM program. Tell me what STEM is.
STEM is STEM. What's the full form of STEM?
Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yes. So, all those wonderful things. But I think it's just like this being a big umbrella, and tech skills are so, there are so many fun ways to learn technology. So there is a big push on getting all kids, especially girls, into STEM, which is very important. And I think part of that is teaching robotics and coding, and things like, how do you make a YouTube video? How do you use Google Slides? When I was 8 years old, I knew nothing about slides or computer or PowerPoint, and now we have elementary school kids who are pros at Zoom. They probably know more about Zoom than I do. They can make these PowerPoint presentations and add animations and all that sort of stuff. So I think COVID, this pandemic, it's been a challenge to the entire world. But I think we need to use this as an opportunity to learn things that we would have not learned otherwise. And a part of that is tech skills, because,
Right.
the future is, you have to be very comfortable with the tech. It's everywhere.
You had mentioned, one of the parts of STEM is math. And for me, in my household, my partner, Dana, she has a master's degree in statistics and she's a data analyst. And she also is extremely smart, much smarter than me. and if there's ever anything that needs to be done, like garbage disposal or transmission in our cars changed, she's the one that does it. So in my household, I am the secondary. she's the skilled one. I'm just here to make people laugh. So we are definitely a woman-led household, and I'm proud to say that. She's the mother. I'm a step parent, so I follow her lead, and I'm proud to say it. So she wears the pants in the relationship.
That's so.
It's cool
so
to
nice
see more
to
and more
hear.
of that. No, it's true, and I mean, and when you are a step parent, you have to take a back seat. That's just one of the first things you have to learn. And so when you take on that relationship, it's the most important thing. If you try to dictate, I've talked to the boys at length and they're like, it's never worked. There's a reason that she was single again, after dating and whatnot. But that's a little side note. So let's talk about the website. We really want to drill this home. We've been hinting at it. The website is called educationalequitynow.com. What was the motivation for starting it? And let's start with that.
Absolutely. So educationalequitynow.com started, with one of the conversations Nels and I were having, late at night. Is like, I have all the, he mentioned he has all these resources. He knows all these, websites that provide a variety of resources for learning, life skills, vocational training, community engagement resources, professional development resources. And he's like, I wish there was a way to share this with the world. And I was like, well, I can make you a website. And, that's pretty much how it started. And I am very passionate about knowledge share. I want to learn and grow every single day. We have a saying in our household that if you learn something new every day, it's a good day.
Right.
Yeah. So, that it just started with that. And the way I see educational equity now is it's like a playground where students.
Hold on. I'm gonna stop you real quick. We got some thumping going on. I don't know what's going on with the audio. Is there anyway, go ahead.
That's the kids upstairs.
Oh, they're bouncing the balls. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Wait, are you still on pause?
No, we're going.
Okay, sorry.
So educational equity now, as I see it, is a playground where students, educators, parents, pretty much anybody can go there. They can choose a path that they want to explore, which is why, like, when you go to the homepage, you will see it's like you can choose your journey. Are you here for education? Are you here to look for some community engagement resources? Are you here for professional development? And let's say you drill into educational resources, it just opens up this world of all these. Okay, well, I want to learn something about English language arts, or I would really like some help with math. So it's split into all these categories, and within each category is all the resources that Nels and I could find. I've put them there. There are links there. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, and those are the external websites, and then some of them have a free tier. So the way I see educational equity now, it's a playground. It is free. And people can go there and explore and learn, and it's just one place where eventually I would love to have so many more resources. And having a full-time job and being a mom and working on this website, I can't really keep up with it all the time. So if there's a tech person out there who would like to just kind of help out sometimes, I would love that as well. So yeah, that's what it's all about.
So the goal is to become a nonprofit.
Absolutely.
And so what does the process look like with that?
When it comes to the business side of things, that's where Nels chimes in. I'm the tech person. I just he will tell me make this happen, and I'll make it happen. And then eventually I think we would like it to be a nonprofit. We would like to have some board members, and just kind of.
It's pretty easy to file an application to start a nonprofit. I've done one in the past once. Actually, forming a nonprofit is just completing some paperwork that you can find online. It's a little bit harder to file as a 501c for tax exempt status. That can be more of a process. I plan to reach out to community allies that I know who have nonprofits and kind of get their advice and just learn from others and do some research. That's the next step of what we're working on. I would say that our website is not just linking other websites, it also links educational videos and podcasts that we think are relevant as well. We'd love to link your podcast under community resources, if that would be something that you'd be all right with.
I'm definitely down with that. And then we were going to... Go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly add, I also wanted a space because Nels creates really amazing lesson plans and things like that. And he really puts in a lot of time. He sometimes engages kids with that. So he creates all this amazing stuff. We wanted a space to share that, so we find Education Equity now as a platform to share all those custom lessons that are created by Nels as well. And, another great thing about is once you put those resources there, you can access them from anywhere in the world, from any device.
Right.
We also want to encourage other teachers, if they have resources that they're willing to share, kind of as an alternative, to Teachers Pay Teachers, where teachers have educational things that they've created that they're willing to share for free with the community. They can reach out to us on the contact us page and let us know what they're willing to share. And that we can it's a collaborative hub is the way I see it, so that anyone who has something that they've created that they want to share, or video links, or a podcast that they think is really good, or websites that are really good, and particularly prioritizing free websites. We do have some that are paid because the special ed committee, I asked them to tell me their favorite websites in all the different categories. And so I put on whatever was shared from the other SPED committee members. And some of those links are to paid sites, but as this evolves, we want to be more and more free resources and less paid.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that vision, I still am building upon this idea of, how Kickstarters work. Like you have a Kickstarter project, and people fund your project, and then they eventually get your end product. I don't know of a space where that is available for teachers. Like, I'm a teacher, I want to create a lesson, and I need somebody to fund me for that. So that sort of deal, slowly, I think we're going to build towards that and has that as one of our features as well.
Yeah. And it's really cool. I mean, just browsing through it, I've only gone on there a little bit, but like you had said before, there's different sections. You've got like English, you've got history, you've got math, and all these different areas. And then inside of that, it's going to continue to grow. When did this whole project start, and when did it officially launch?
So this whole project started just over a month and a half ago. Okay. And I think, out of that, probably majority of the time that I spent on this was just thinking about the skeleton of how I'm going to build this website or app. Once I had that, I want to have a solid foundations. Once I made that solid foundation, adding new resources does not take very long. It takes me 5, like last night, he's like, hey, honey, there's like 5 new resources. Can you add them? Took me 10 minutes to add them.
Sure.
So yeah. And then, I finally launched this just about a week ago, for the entire world to look at. I haven't shared it anywhere quite yet because I wanted it to be at a stable state. So it is very stable, and, it's ready for people to dive right in.
You're the official public launch, Patrick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is cool. Yeah. One of the Khan Academy is a website that I was a big fan of in the early stages, at least when I was first aware of it. And what I noticed that is changed, it's kind of more like an online school now. Before, it almost had this kind of like video game feel where you got like points and like there'd be like 100 points when you got things right. And I don't know if they do that quite as much now. And that's something that I'd like to see more of, because I feel like for me, I was I went to school to be a barber. I didn't go to college. And then there was a point where I'm like, I kind of want to pick and choose these free tools that are happening now in technology where I can learn a subject, maybe like a foreign language or maybe like more about history. And I like it to be kind of rewarding in that setting instead of just getting an A, instead of just getting a grade. And so that's something I'd like to see more and more of. Is that something that you guys would like to implement as well? Maybe some games so that for all ages, but and not just kids, like not just like 4-year-olds or 5-7-year-olds, for 17-year-olds that want to make it to where it's rewarding.
Absolutely. That is great point. And that kind of ties into one of the ideas I've had in the back of my head. So our seventh grader, he has been learning to code, and he has created a variety of different games. They're not like the fancy games, but this latest project that he's working on a game where you enter your name, it shows you the image of an ocean, it shows you as a diver. The game is called Pacific Garbage Patch Cleanup. So, you enter your name, you click begin, and then you as a diver with your keyboard can move, and it shows you random garbage at the bottom of the ocean. And then you go and you touch each one of the garbages, and it gives you 20 points for each thing that you clean up. So, having a message along with the game is like, hey, let's clean the Pacific Ocean garbage patch, stuff like that. So absolutely. I would love
to, for even for adults and for young adults and for people my age, I just think that using that game style when it comes to learning, it becomes something that it's fun. And so it's not wonky. Cause like I'm not much of a reader, for example. So to just sit down with like literature or whatnot, it seems like a task, and so I was really impressed. I don't know if you know what I mean with Khan Academy specifically, and this was like years ago, probably 8-10 years ago that it had started, and I think they've gone away from that. I think now it's more just like online school. It doesn't feel like, I was answering these history, you'd read something and then they would ask you questions on the review section, and when you got something right, it would be like 100 points, and I was like, this is awesome, and
yeah.
Well, there are still, it depends on the site. It depends on the resource. Like there's some resources on our site that are like in a game based. In the STEM category, there's about 4 or 5 different resources for learning computer coding. And a lot of those are game based. Some of them you even can create your own mini games. I want to do a shout out for freereadingprogram.com. Freereadingprogram.com is a really good website. That's for people learning to read between a kindergarten and a 6th grade level, and all of that's game based, and you earn stars, and then you click the button at the bottom right to save your progress when you've earned all the stars, and it auto saves progress. You can look up a report for everything you've learned, and I believe if you go through the levels of that, they correlate to grade levels, and if you basically can learn reading from a kindergarten through a 6th grade level, for free. It's completely free to have an account. That's linked under our reading resources. We linked there's a site called MrNussbaum.com, and that has a bunch of learning games in it as well that are pretty fun, and that's covers a variety of subject areas. That's linked on our thing. And then, like I said, there's a lot of coding games, and there's always room for innovation. And I'm sure as word gets out, and more people tell us their favorite free resources in education, that we'll find some more things that are game based, like you're mentioning. It's just there's so much out there that it's a matter of kind of weeding through and seeing what works for each individual learning style.
Right. So now who is the website primarily directed towards?
The website is primarily directed towards students, kids, educators, and parents.
And then specifically, with also a side focus on students with exceptionalities. And
I wouldn't say it's a side focus. I would say that's also, when I originally wrote like the description of the website, I said it's focused on helping students, and especially those who experience exceptionalities. And so that's not a side focus, that's a major focus. But anyone can use the website. We don't want to narrow the appeal or who it can help. We really feel like the things on there can help any level of learner, from kindergarten all the way up to college level or beyond, from kindergarten to adult. But there are a lot of specific resources on there specifically for people who experience exceptionalities. I've been working in special education for 18 years. And that is not a side focus. That's a primary focus as well.
Yeah,
And
and
it links
I didn't want to imply that. I guess more or less I wanted to kind of drill it home that this is a tool that can be used by everyone,
by everyone.
in some way. So
absolutely.
And many of the community resources linked on the community resources page are specifically for people who experience exceptionalities.
Absolutely.
So necessary. I mean, the whole point of equity is, giving the tools to make sure that people are then, given the ability to have a seat at the table, more or less, because they're given the tools. Is there going to be, stuff maybe focused towards immigrants as well?
I would love to have some of that, but just to add on to that, I used to be a professor back in India. I love teaching. The only barrier here in US between me and being an official teacher is I have to go to school for 2 years, and I don't have the bandwidth for that at the moment. But I would love to create some lessons about how to code this little thing, or how to do like some of the project management side of things, how to prepare yourself for an interview, or stuff like that. So absolutely, I would love to have stuff like that. Girls Who Code is another resource that we should probably link here. I would love to. I wish I didn't need to sleep at all. I could operate 24 hours without getting tired. But I would love to start a Girls Who Code club here in Eugene as well, that is targeted towards I think elementary and high school girls, and they get together, and then there's usually, based on how many students there are, X number of teachers, and they send you all the assignments and the projects, and you just kind of help girls learn that stuff.
So music is another one. And before we get out of here, I've got one more thing I want to focus on, but I want to give a shout out to Joey Helpish. We're going to be playing his music in a little bit. And that's something I'd like to connect you guys with. He has a school called Dandyland Studios, and that would be a useful resource for people to access, because he teaches music for all ages. He focuses a lot on kids. He teaches kids with on the autism spectrum how to record music at whatever capacity. Some are nonverbal, and so just taking part in the songwriting workshops that he teaches, it's pretty incredible what he does. I've had him on a couple times, Dandyland Studios. So when we get out of here today, I'm gonna set you guys up with connects to talk to him, because I think that music, again, back to what I was talking about with games and the rewards, when you write a song and you have a finished product, even if you had a small sliver part of it, I've had friends that have recorded a backup vocal on one of my songs back in the day, and that's all it was. But they know it's in there. No one else can hear it, really, but they know that they took part in it, and there's an ownership and there's a sense of pride in this creativity. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. So now, what is the call to action? Obviously, for anyone listening, is to go to the website, educationalequitynow.com. But then also, you've mentioned a few times throughout this interview about people contacting you on the Contact Me Now. So who would you like to contact you? Teachers primarily. You had said that you'd like to hear from teachers what they would want. Speak on that a little bit.
So the contact us page primarily is anyone who would like to contact us. It could be for a variety of reasons. A teacher has resources they want to share, they should contact us there. A parent has a certain question or a request for this specific need that they are looking for resources, they can contact us there as well. And then of course, other organizations who are into education, all the community engagement stuff that happens around our area. Somebody has professional development resources that they would want to feature on our website. So, all of them, they can contact us. Between Nels and I will try to respond as soon as we possibly can. I'm also working towards creating like a public forum sort of, experience on the website. That I still need to get started on that, but that will be a spot where we would have some question and answers. Of course, no legal advice sort of deal, but, just some basic question and we will try to answer them. And then also space for people to ask specific questions as well. And then, if we answer it and it's approved and all, that would also show up. So, if people are looking for some additional information, they can go and review that. And if still they cannot find what they're looking for in that space, then they can also use the contact us to, ask for their needs. And it's just primarily a way for people to talk to us and, give us their honest feedback as well. And, I think asking for feedback is very, very important. So,
and sharing resources, asking for feedback. I'm a little bit, we're going to do our best to answer the communication that we get. Obviously, we both work full time and we're parents of a 12 and an 8-year-old. So as things evolve, as we become a nonprofit and maybe get a board of directors and get other people helping with this, then we'll be able to increase our capacity to respond. But we'll do our best as this is still developing. We'll do our best to respond to any questions and add links for free resources that we vet and that are free resources that help promote equity. Primarily is what we're looking for resources.
Yeah. And just to add to that, when you talk about equity and equality, I think it is very, very important for all of us to feel equal. And, it doesn't matter my gender or the color of my skin or my accent. It's all about, do I know what I'm talking about? And, how can we provide resources to the kids who are going to be the future of this planet? And as I'm just going to add this quote, it's one of my favorites. Nelson Mandela says, education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. And I can't just go out there and say, okay, I'm going to change the world. I have to do small steps and just impact the people, around me, my community, our community. And then it's just like a trickling effect, and, it just will spread, I hope.
Well, it's really cool to see what you guys have been able to accomplish in a short amount of time. And I know that it's going to continue to grow. And I really, really, really encourage anybody listening to go check out educationalequitynow.com. It's awesome. And it's just getting started. I mean, I know it's going to continue to grow, and, you'll add little tools and you'll find out what's working and what's not, what needs to be removed, what needs to be added and kind of built on. So that's great. So thank you so much for coming and talking to me today. And you're both, always welcome on the show. I'm sure Nels and I have kind of made a backdoor agreement where we're going to have them on at least once every 6 months or so. Cool. So, and I think the work that you, Nels, the work that you do with special education is amazing, and I'm really proud of you, knowing that I've known you for 20 plus years and whatnot, to see where you've come from how different we were at 20 years old. We were little punks. And Chara, it's very nice to get to know you as well. And I know that the relationship that you guys share with your children and the sense of pride you have in your family is really inspiring, and so it's pretty cool to see. So again, you're very welcome. And thanks for coming on. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to end this with a song, and this song is kind of heavy. Joey Helpish, the song is called Neurotypical, and he is on the autism spectrum himself. And he is an educator, music educator, amateur. I mean, I wouldn't say amateur. He doesn't use it. It's a non-structured style. So I think it's really cool what he does. But, this song specifically, he was talking about how he has to kind of mask himself so that people can understand what he's like, because he's wired so differently. And it's a really heavy song, and it's really personal. And it's one of the things I love about him is that he'll really open up about it. And the work that he does with people on the autism spectrum creating music is amazing. I mean, he has told me before how he works really hard to get nonverbal students. He's like, I'm gonna get them talking, and he's been successful. So it's pretty cool. And I know the parents are just like, oh, I can't even believe where we started. It's not just music too. He's got one of his students that he's been working on making animated YouTube videos, and it's hilarious because this kid makes these videos that are talking trash on Joey Helpish, the teacher, and Joey publishes them. He's like, oh, this is so great, you know, and so it's really cool. So thank you both for coming on. I really appreciate you. Educationalequitynow.com. People check it out. The link is in the show notes. And then we're going to get out of here. This is Joey Helpish with Neurotypical.
I was born lonesome man, easy to misunderstand. Mama did raise no fool. Mama baby raised me at home. But the lights too bright, clothes too tight, strange sounds keeping me up at night. Try so hard just to feel alright. Tired of the struggle and I'm tired of the fight. Who are these people? All so strange. Feeling like an Indian, they call me deranged. It's like they on the wrong book, but the same page. Only time they understand me is when I'm on stage. When I ain't asking, I'm vulnerable. 'Cause I ain't no neurotypical. When I ain't asking, I'm vulnerable. 'Cause I ain't no neurotypical. Stop the twitching is all it asks. So I'm forced to put on the mask. There must be something wrong with you. What they say, when I do it, I do. And I hold my breath every time they pass, wondering how long this will last. If I move fast, will they know the truth? The secret that I used to keep in my youth. Carbon copy, that ain't me. Stuck inside my ability. Like the rough, sure strange to see. A grown ass man, that's not me. When I ain't asking, I'm vulnerable. 'Cause I ain't no neurotypical. When I ain't asking, I'm vulnerable. 'Cause I ain't no neurotypical.